Hello, everyone. This is Surayya Walters, and welcome to the Purposeful Professional. Celebrate with me. Yes, this podcast is finally launched. I'm super excited for you all to finally hear this season, which is entitled Finding Ourselves. This season, we are going to find ourselves. This season, we are going to learn who we are, and we are going to also understand how the stories of others can help us to uncover our own purpose. This is the Purposeful Professional, right? What does it mean to be professional? But what does it mean to have a purpose? We're going to explore all of these questions this season. But before we start and before you listen to the first episode, I want to make sure that you understand what this is about. So we're going to not only spotlight professionals that are doing great and marvelous things, people that are changing the world in big or small ways, but we're also going to spotlight music and art from young and up and coming producers and talent. So I hope that you enjoy this song and this intro song created by a young and up and coming producer. And I hope that you will also listen to this episode and come along with us this journey as we take this season into our own hands and really learn how to find and discover ourselves. Hello, everyone. My name is Surayya Walters, and I am the host of the Purposeful Professional. I want to introduce you to our first season. And I want to entitle this first season Finding Ourselves. I think I've been on a journey. I've been on a journey to not only find myself, but find what truly makes me special. Like many recent college graduates, I went through a period where I didn't know what I was doing. I went through a period where I was trying to figure out who I was without the confines of education. I think in America, one of the beauties of our university system is that you can go to school K through 12, you can go to college. The path is very predictable. So when I stepped out of college, it was a lot of emotions. It was really a mixed bag, but it was a time that allowed me to find myself. And that's exactly why I wanted to entitle this first season Finding Ourselves. I think in my heart of hearts, I wanted to create a podcast and a space where people could talk about what makes them passionate about their professions. I believe and I totally understand that your purpose should be tied to your profession. And that's exactly why I wanted to start TPP, the Purposeful Professional. But today I'm going to talk a little bit about my story and who I am. So please get to know me as I talk about finding ourselves and the inspiration for season one. So as I'm recording this, all of the episodes for season one have actually been recorded. So first and foremost, like shout out and thank you to those who have participated in this process. This was a creative process. This was a different process for me. As much as I am a speaker, production, audio, all that other stuff, really drove me nuts. And I'm starting to think, wow, like I have enough respect for podcasters because there's so much effort that goes into building and sustaining a podcast. I didn't even understand that. So if you're a podcaster listening to the sound of my voice, I really 100%, 1000% respect you and want to give you your props. But I really decided to start this because I wanted to find a way to connect with people. I wanted to find a way to pull back the veil on what people think is professionalism, what people think is purpose, and have these interviews and have these conversations. So through all of these conversations, I started picking up little gems. And I was like, you know what? What is the core? What is the thing that is uniting all of these episodes? I have one about being an artist. I have another one about New York City. I have another one about unapologetic energy. I have another one about the realities of being an entrepreneur. Like what unites all of these conversations? I think what unites all these conversations is that in each conversation, I'm finding myself and my guest is finding themselves. I believe that conversation is a tool for transformation. Like, conversation isn't just having a conversation, it is a tool for transformation. So, throughout this season, throughout all of the episodes, I have learned that I was unlocking and finding myself through the conversation, and they were unlocking and finding themselves through the conversation. And that's exactly how I settled on the title, Finding Ourselves. The conversations I've had have been transformative. Sometimes I've actually sat up at night thinking about the podcast conversations, and I think the process of editing and listening over to the conversations really introduced me to myself in a different way. And hopefully it will introduce you to the guest in a different way. I didn't want to make this a podcast where I always was talking. I wanted to make this a podcast and an experience where I was actually listening to other people, because I think that through human experiences, we see ourselves. We see ourselves in a mirror, sometimes through other people. Other people mirror who we are back to ourselves. So I really wanted to have that time, and I'm really excited to release this season. I'm really, really grateful. All the episodes are amazing. I'm excited for you all to hear it. But like I said, I promised I'd get to my story. So a little bit about me. So my name is Surayya Walters. I guess you can say I'm a lot of different things. I remember when I was in college, I identified really strongly with something that was coined by Emily Wapnick, and it's called like multi-potentialite. So I identify really strongly with this thing of being a multi-potentialite. I identify strongly with the ability to choose my path and chart my course. So I grew up really be interested in everything. I think I've had a phase where I was going to be in entertainment. I had a phase where I wanted to be, an advocate and a justice fighter. I had a phase where I wanted to be a writer and an intellectual. Like, I feel like I had all those phases growing up, and those phases actually stuck with me. Like, I think sometimes we think, oh, well, that phase, you went through that career phase. No, like, all those career phases stuck with me, because today my career is an amalgamation of all those things. So I'm going to take you all the way back to where it began, New Rochelle, New York. So I was actually born in the Bronx, but I moved to New Rochelle as a kid. And in New Rochelle, New York, I was able to attend public school, which exposed me to a lot of the arts. So the public school I attended was a public school for arts and humanities. So I was going to public school, and I was really young. I was like maybe 8, 9 years old. And in that public school, I was participating in performing arts. I was doing everything from like drama club, I was doing the talent shows. And if you asked me what I wanted to be back then, I would tell you I wanted to be a dancer and an actress. A lot of people don't know that about me, but I really do have a love for the arts. I think I'm creative that way. And I always loved dancing. I've always loved performing. I've always been super Black with it too. So I remember when I was in um, elementary school for the talent show, we actually danced to Chris Brown. So like, I was super Black, super into BET, super into 106 in Park. I was just super into the arts, period. Like, I really always saw the arts as a great thing. And I loved acting. Like, I loved being on stage. I loved performing. I always had a really strong voice. So I always had a voice that would project really loudly. So I figured like, hey, where do you go where you have a strong voice? I would go to the stage. I remember sometimes it felt like it was fate for me to like learn these acting skills, because I was shy. So I actually grew up really shy. But every time I would try to, let's say, I would try to sign up for dance instead of acting, I was always in the drama club. And looking back on my life, it's like, okay, well, God was trying to get me comfortable with speaking so I could have this podcast that I have. So that's all the way of where my journey started. It started with me wanting to be a dancer and an actress. It started with me acknowledging that I was a creative from a very young age, that I had this creative bent. I even tried instruments. So I tried like playing the violin. I wasn't that good at music, but I was very musical with my dancing, with my rhythm. I was very musical with how I used my body. I always say today, like, the body is an instrument in dance. And I think that's kind of what gave me the start to my career and my journey, just understanding that I was creative and that I've thrived in environments that I had to take risk in. Sometimes it's funny, but as an actor, every time you step out on the stage, you might not remember your lines. You might rehearse, but you might not remember. And I think that every time I stepped out on the stage, it was a different performance. So I performed in plays, I performed in talent shows, recitals. It was a different performance. It was a different energy. And I think from a young age, I began to realize that about myself, that I loved the creative arts, but I also loved performing. So furthermore, like moving into like middle school. So middle school, I still was in New Rochelle, New York. This time I went to a religious school. So I actually started making the transition from public school to private school. Private school was much different. It was definitely different for me. Private school is where I first started to realize that I was actually a very good student. So when I went to public school, and I think that's one of the flaws with sometimes the public school system, it doesn't necessarily engage all the students. There's so many students in the classroom, you don't necessarily get that one-on-one. But when I went to private school, when I went to my middle school, I began to realize that I was actually a good student, that I actually liked school. So I remember the first time I got on the honor roll was in middle school. And from there, I just said, you know what? I love this feeling. I want to get on the honor roll all the time. So middle school is where I discovered, I guess you could say, my more cerebral side. I started writing. I remember back in middle school, people would like ask me if I had a Wattpad. For those who know what Wattpad is, like folks would ask me like, do you have a Wattpad? Like, do you write? And I would always say, like, no, I just write these essays and these stories. But people always liked my stories. People always wanted to read my stories. And I remember from middle school, even the girls that like didn't necessarily like me, like we weren't necessarily friends, they would read my stories and they'd be like, you know what? If you write a book, I'm going to read your book. So that was my phase where I started transitioning from, okay, I could just be a dancer and an actress. I started transitioning from that into like actually seeing myself as maybe a writer, actually seeing myself as maybe, someone who has important things to say. Once again, creativity being a theme, but understanding that I also was gifted in the writing. I was gifted in my ability to use words to communicate things. I would write stories, I would write poems, I would do like spoken word stuff. And this was me at like a young age, like trying to find a way to express myself. So I think that is one major way that I developed and one major way that my story, my career story changed. I started seeing myself not just as an instrumental artistic creative, but maybe an intellectual creative, maybe someone who has like intellectual abilities, right? So from there, moving on, I actually started to get involved in leadership. So middle school is where I started to get involved in leadership. I always had like 1,000 ideas for things. And even though I was shy, I think there was something in me that like I wanted to be a leader. I remember when I was in elementary school and I was in this program that was not the gifted program, but I remember I would see the gifted program students, they would have their like elections and they would do their, student government stuff. And I began realizing, well, I want one day to be a president of student government. I remember seeing other people's campaigns and other people's flyers. And I said, you know what, one day I'm going to be campaigning. And so it became like a couple years later, I remember I was ran for student government when I was in 8th grade. I ran for student government president. I ran that year that I ran, it was like 12 people running and it was so scary. And thank you, Lord, God was on my side. I was able to run for student government president and win. I remember I was in the finals against a male student, and I was always running against a man. That's like a theme in my life. I was always the woman running against the man. But I think that I was running against a male student and I was so scared. We had a debate. And I think that was when I had to learn how to express my idea as well. So it went from writing and being a writing creative into being a speaking creative and into being a leadership creative. I began realizing, well, the same vision that I have for dance, the same vision that I have for writing is the same vision I have for leadership in my community. So when I became president of the student government in 8th grade, president student body, I decided that I was going to execute a vision. Like I had ideas, I had concepts. I grew up with Disney Channel, High School Musical, like I grew up in that era. So, I had my perfect school experience in my mind, and I wanted to help my school to become that. I went to majority minority middle school. And for those who know my journey, I also went to majority minority high school. So I began realizing, well, I could fundraise for resources. We could hold these events. We could hold these things. I could bring student life where there was no student life. So I began seeing myself as not only, like I said, a writer, dancer creative, but also a leadership creative. And that leadership and speaking has carried me through life. Today, I am the founder of Identity. I'm a nonprofit bringing DEI to the startup ecosystem. I'm also the founder of Still Knowing, a digital platform blending faith and mental health for youth. And I skipped over my high school portion for a good reason. I think I skipped over my high school story just because Yeah, high school was like the same as middle school. I was in leadership, I was in public speaking, I was in debate, I was in yearbook. So once again, I was using like my creativity to produce a vision and to go out there and do something. College was also very, very similar. So I began to realize that I had these gifts. I began to realize that this is who I was at my core. Like I was a creative, I was a leader, I could execute a vision, I had a great vision, and I'm very spiritual. So I come about this as, what does God want for me? Like, what does God want me to do? So, when I naturally found myself in entrepreneurship after college, skipping over a couple things I know, but hopefully, as y'all listen, you'll get a clear picture of my story. As I naturally found myself in entrepreneurship after college, I began to realize that finding myself is what I needed to do. But I always kind of knew who I was. I always kind of knew that I was an entrepreneur, that I was a founder. However, I also struggled to accept it. So, a major reason why I wanted to do the podcast was to kind of uncover the thought processes behind the quote unquote success. You might see the business, you might see the nonprofit, but you don't know the shoes that the founder has walked in, or you don't know the shoes that the founding team has walked in. I think a major part of finding myself was looking back at my childhood self, as I spoke about before, and understanding, who was I before the world tethered me to a certain identity? Like, who was I before I felt I had to be something? So that is really the spirit and the vein in which I've operated in. And I think my story has always been to expand my vision, to use my creativity for good, and to think of different ways to execute and inspire and empower others. So that's really me. It's some fun stuff about me. Let's talk about some fun stuff. So on the fun side, I really love to cook. I feel like COVID made me a home cook. COVID made me like the female Gordon Ramsay. Like I'm out here cooking meals. I'm out here chefing it up like most of the time. So I really do love to cook. That's one of my favorite hobbies. But I also really love music. For those who know me, know I am such a huge fan of music. I'm such a huge fan of music and culture. And I think one of my dream jobs, I don't have it right now, but is actually to be a cultural commentator. And I've been thinking about maybe releasing a podcast around cultural commentary. But yeah, I'm gonna need a team for that one. But I think about like cultural commentary and the fact that I really love culture and popular culture. I've always loved it from when I was a kid, from when I was dancing. Like I told you all, I've always loved music and culture. So that's also a really great hobby of mine, keeping up with music and culture. I'm an avid listener of podcasts. So I actually listen to podcasts. I probably listen to a podcast every day, which is very unique. A lot of folks don't listen to a podcast every day, but I think that I'm always trying to grow. I'm always trying to learn. I'm always trying to evolve. So I naturally found myself in the podcast realm, listening to podcasts and trying to learn more about myself. I also like writing. So I also am a huge writer. I talked about like my roots of writing in elementary and middle school, but I think it's become a huge thing. So in college, I was a columnist for the Daily Pennsylvanian. Today, I'm a blogger. Like I actually really do like writing. I think that writing is something that is one of my greatest hobbies, and I really do love expressing myself. So those are all of my that's like me from the hobbies perspective of what I like to do. And I just like to learn. I just like to grow. I like to meet new people and have great conversations. And I think that's exactly why I wanted to start this platform. So I also wanted to take some time to describe to you all like my personality and who I believe I am, just to get you an understanding of me. So my personality is very energetic. I'm also very outgoing. I'm very driven, I would say, but I'm also very creative, contemplative. I'm very spiritual. I think my creativity is like a spiritual creativity. Like sometimes I'll just get inspired by what I see, and I'll go out and I'll just write my ideas down and I'll just start dreaming about them. So I'm a big dreamer, but I'm also a big doer. I think I'm a big like go out there and get it out the mud. I'm a motivator. So when you listen to this, you might feel like I'm your coach. I like people say Meg the Stallion is the hot girl coach. I'm the get your life coach. Like I'm always there. I'm the motivator. I just have that energy where I really love to take people along with me. I'm the collector of introverts. I'm a big extrovert, but I collect introverted folks as friends and I make them feel included. So I think these are the things about my personality that I wanted to share. Career wise, I'm a big like iconoclast. I'm big on like crafting my own path, paving my own path. And I think in the latter half of this episode, we're going to talk about a couple of things that I've learned, not only just doing this podcast, but through entrepreneurship. I'm big about paving my own path, having my own dreams, having my own vision. I'm inspired and I admire people like Oprah Winfrey. I stand on the shoulders of women like her, as much as, I know that there's some stuff out there about Oprah, but I stand on the shoulders of Oprah Winfrey. I stand on the shoulders of women who have done great and wonderful things that I one day want to do, especially women of color. I stand on their shoulders because I truly believe that that is my purpose and my calling, to go out there and pave my own path and to show other people what's possible. So I think my whole life I've been prepared for this moment. And that's exactly what I want, my life to represent. So that's also that part of me. I have that like deep part of me that fuels my career vision to be kind of iconoclastic. But that's what got me into doing this podcast. So I think that's really, really great. So in the next half of this episode, I'm going to talk about a couple of tangible tips about what I have learned on my journey. I've almost fully fledged into entrepreneurship. I've been doing it for a couple of months, and I want to talk about like what I've learned about my journey and kind of give you all an insight into me through the Purposeful Professional. We had some fun talking about my experiences, but now I want to give you the tangible, like this is what I know now. Based on my college graduation and even beyond, this is what I've learned, and this is what you could take from my journey and apply to yours. All right, y'all. See you in the next part of this episode. Okay, so I want to start off with the things that I have learned. And a couple of these are tips across entrepreneurship, life, all these things. I want to really share what I have learned. And then I also want to share some tips for you. As a listener through this journey, through this season of finding ourselves, I want you to also do the work. I shared my story, I shared a couple things about me, but one big thing about me, and I told you all this, I'm a motivator. So I like to go out there and motivate other people. And I want you to leave this conversation in this podcast feeling motivated, feeling like you can take things on, even if you don't necessarily know what to do. So here is what I've learned in my 1 year after graduating college. Number one, entrepreneurship is an art form while business is a science. I think I studied the science of business. For those who know me, I attended the Wharton School for undergrad. I studied the science of business. Business can be very scientific, from data analysis to A/B testing. It can be very scientific. Some people make it a science, but I realize that entrepreneurship is actually the art form. So as an entrepreneur, you are an artist, and I think that that is something that a lot of people aren't necessarily used to. And artists, what I love about the artist, and there's an episode this season called "The Artist Way," and how we can apply the mindset of being artists to our pursuits. What I love about an artist is not afraid to scratch a piece, no matter how long they've been working on it, if they feel like it's not perfect. I think as an entrepreneur, you're an artist, right? You might draw something in the form of a brand name, and then you might erase it, right? You go through different phases. You go through sketching, you go through painting, you go through collaging, you go through all different types of phases. And there are many different ways to make beautiful art. So I think entrepreneurship is an art form while business is a science. It's important to know, if you're listening to this and want to be a founder, that art has many different interpretations, right? So there are many different ways to do business, especially in the beginning. I think one of the things that tripped me up, and that's why I wanted to entitle this season Finding Ourselves, is because I began thinking I had to do entrepreneurship like how I saw other people do it. I had to be or move as fast as they did. But I really love the saying that slow and steady wins the race. You know the story of the tortoise and the hare, right? The tortoise actually reached the finish line before the hare did. I think entrepreneurship is an art form. You never see an artist really comparing their art to someone else. They understand that their art is unique. So I encourage you all to understand, if you are a founder and you're listening to this, entrepreneurship is an art form, business is a science. To do well as an entrepreneur, you need to channel that art, channel that artist in you, that willingness to break with tradition, try new things, experiment, be creative, and go out there and go through the phases of sketching, painting, collaging, all the different ways that you can make a beautiful masterpiece. All right. Number two, sitting on a good idea is so unacceptable. So I learned that, and this is a major part of me finding myself, that sitting on a good idea is unacceptable. If you have a good idea, if you have a good concept, if you have a good anything, you need to go out there and test it. You need to go out there and put it out there. Like, sitting on a good idea is unacceptable. I think of where I would be today had I sat on my ideas. And I was obviously really scared. So I was 21, solo founder. I was scared. Where would I be if I sat on my ideas? I wouldn't be where I am today. So sitting on a good idea is so unacceptable. Go out there, put your ideas out there. Even if you want to just do maybe a Twitter poll, or, we have threads now, you want to just do a thread and ask people, hey, what do you think of this idea? What I've realized is that ideas don't differentiate people, execution does. So a lot of people have good ideas. I would say all of us are creative, right? All humans are creative. All humans have great ideas, but who goes out there and executes them? So don't be so protective of ideas. Go out there and test them, talk to people about them, get feedback, because if it's yours to execute, you will always be the executor. But sitting on that idea, keeping it in a journal, keeping that on a vision board, not doing anything about it is so unacceptable. Go out there and don't sit on those ideas, but go out there and implement them. The third thing I've learned is that there are people that will fund your ideas. Find them. A huge barrier to us starting is, where am I going to find the funding, especially when you're young? Finding ourselves can also be entitled finding funds, finding donors, finding venture capital, finding, like, how can I find the support? There are people that will fund your ideas. Find them. I probably will maybe start after this season sharing more practical and pragmatic tips, but there are people that will fund your ideas. Look for grant opportunities, look for fellowship opportunities that come with funding, look for ways to grow your network and be around people that believe in ideas. I would say that there are some organizations and societies, and not even just societies, but there's some spaces that follow and align more with the status quo, while there are other spaces that align more with going out there and becoming the best you that you can be. So, and also trying those new ideas and trying those dope things that you might think of in your brain. So find those people that fund ideas. Find idea people and align yourself with them, and find and pitch your ideas. My nonprofit identity started off as an idea. I did not even really have any proof, but I was able to get funding for an idea. So find people who fund ideas, because they're out there. Don't be discouraged if you are in the idea phase and you need cash. Like I always say, open yourself up to the world, and the world will open yourself up to you. There are people that fund ideas. Find them. The fourth thing I've learned is that success takes time. Be fast, but be patient. Success takes a lot of time. Like, success is not something that I could say happens overnight. I would say you need to be fast and move quickly, but you also need to realize there are certain things that are not your speed. Like, especially if you're a founder, the market will have to catch up sometimes. So you be fast, be agile, but still be patient. I think of like what happened with Zoom, which was that company that existed for years, but the COVID-19 pandemic pushed it into having an IPO. And this is not an entrepreneurship podcast, but I just want to share what I learned as a founder. Like I said, I'm going to share different things. Success takes time. Be fast, but be patient. Give yourself that grace if you don't see results in a certain amount of time, because you are doing the work. Like if you show up every day, I say, like, I show up every day, I lay a brick. If you show up every day, you are doing the work. Success takes time. Be fast, but be patient, right? Give yourself that opportunity to be patient. The next thing I've learned is that you can't outwork your own capacity. When it comes to health, find your limit and stick to that. So this one, I'm not a scientist, but I'm pretty sure that everyone does not have the same capacity for work. Yes, I do believe that energy is something that can be harnessed. We can always find the energy to do what we want to do, but some people burn out quickly. Some people don't burn out as fast. I think that there's many doctors and researchers who can cover that from a scientific perspective that I can't. But what I will tell you is, don't compare yourself to that person who's grinding like a mad person. It just might not be your capacity. Like, I think one of my favorite pastors said something, and he said, like, you need to have the grace for your race. And I always say that. Don't compare yourself to anyone you see out here grinding, okay, and hustling hard, because number one, that's their capacity. Or number two, that might not be their capacity. They might be on red bill all the time and like going on 1,000 all the time and then crash and burn. So what I think is that when it comes to health, you want to find your limit and you want to stick in that. That's hard for me because I'm also like a super achiever, like many of you listening to my voice right now. But I think that you can't outwork your own capacity. You really, really can't. When it comes to health, find your limit and stick to that. The next thing I've learned is that everyone won't understand your purpose. They aren't supposed to. It's not their purpose. So a huge part of finding ourselves in this entire season is that we'll be talking a lot about purpose. What does it mean to live with a purpose? I will always say, like, purpose is not this big, spiritual, hairy, audacious thing. No, it is actually like a thing of you understanding that you were created for a reason other than yourself, and you live with that intention that you are actually supposed to be someone more than what people say that you're capable of, right? So everyone will understand your purpose. I mean, there are many gurus online, speakers online that speak about this. I'm always tapped into motivational speakers, so I know everyone does not understand your purpose, and that is okay. It is not their purpose. We all have a different purpose. I think that I can think of some people whose jobs I probably wouldn't do, but I still can have mutual admiration for them. They can have mutual admiration for me. What I like to say is that we all work in ecosystems. As human beings, we are dependent upon each other. The doctors need the lawyers, but doctors also need patients to be doctors. If everyone was a doctor, they might have not had any real patients that are very dependent upon them. So I think that that's just one example. Everyone won't understand your purpose. They aren't supposed to. I think a huge part of this season and a huge element of this season that I can't wait for y'all to listen to is the fact that we break this veil of needing validation to go out there and do what we need to do. Like, everyone won't understand your purpose, but they're not supposed to, because it's not their purpose. All right, next, let's get to the learnings from this season. There are good and bad things on the other side of risk. When the good outweighs the bad, you are on to something. So I think for a lot of people, we're of the mindset that all risk are bad. And frankly, sometimes I think society can make us that way. Having a cushion, having a cushy life can make us that way. But in fact, they're both good and bad things on the other side of risk. I've never seen anyone take a risk and say, oh, well, it was just an entire mistake. Like, take, for example, taking a risk to move to a new country that you know no one in. Um, yeah, there's going to be some bad things. You might not know the language at first, so you might have to acclimate. But then there's also a good thing, because you find yourself speaking this language. You find yourself feeling like a local. You find yourself living a life that you maybe never imagined. And that's just one element of risk. So I think that they're both good and bad things on the other side of risk. When the good outweighs the bad, you are onto something. I wouldn't tell anyone to suffer through risk if they feel like the bad outweighs the good. However, one thing I want to tell you all, and this is kind of explored at length in this season, you need to understand that you'll never know what's good or bad if you haven't taken the risk yet. Like, I think a lot of the time we play simulations in our mind, and I'm totally all for being strategic and planning your life and all of that stuff. I believe in that. But I also think that there's a time where you just have to go. For me, I'm big on my faith, and in my faith in my religion and Christianity, a huge theme of the Christian text is that people who God sent to do certain things just had to go. Like, they just had to go. There was no like, oh, I'm gonna wait, God, I don't want to do it. It's like, no, God told you to do it. One of the most powerful examples in the Christian text is the example of Moses putting down his rod and the Red Sea parting. And that is I believe that is in Exodus, for those of my people who read the Bible. But Moses did that. If he waited, they would have been swallowed, because the Bible talks about Pharaoh's army being directly behind them, right? So if he would have waited, there would have been a bad thing, there would have been a bad situation happening. He had to move. So I think what I realized is I've tried to cultivate my faith to understand that there are both good and bad things on the other side of risk. As an early stage founder, has it all been pretty? No, it has not. There have been good things, there have been bad things. But I do feel like when the good outweighs the bad, you are onto something. Like, the good has to always outweigh the bad. And honestly, love conquers evil, right? So the good will always outweigh the bad. There are both good and bad things on the other side of risk. Next, choose ideas that are rooted in your own lived experience. You'll be more motivated to solve them. So we're back on this thing of ideas. I think a huge part and portion of this season is talking about, like, finding the ideas that resonate with you deeply, or finding the things that are rooted in your own lived experience, right? When things are rooted in your own lived experience, you're more likely to solve them. I think Business is hard, entrepreneurship is hard, like any problem solving thing can be really hard. So you want to make sure that you have some sort of psychological ownership of what you're doing, and a huge part of that is that it's rooted in my lived experience. So I know because I went through it, someone else is, and I would encourage you to cultivate that empathy, that collective empathy where it's like, okay, because I went through this and I went through this and it was hard for me, I know someone else is going through this. That is exactly the mindset behind a lot of the things that I've started. It started with me just being inspired by my own path. It started with me being inspired by what I saw and what I experienced and what I felt. And I think empathy can be used as a tool for motivation. We talk a lot about that in this season. But yes, that is one thing I've learned, that you must choose things that are rooted in your own lived experience. You'll be more motivated to solve them. And last but not least, for the section on what I've learned, resilience is a muscle that can be cultivated. You must, I think that a lot of us need to understand. Yeah, let me get back on track. Let me get back on track. That yes, resilience is a muscle that should be cultivated. You must fight for your mental health, resilience, and growth mindset included, right? It is a muscle that can be cultivated. I think that in life, you can either have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. A huge part of this program, a huge part of this podcast is talking about difficult things and the things that make us actually who we are as people. And a lot of the time, those negative experiences, while they feel bad in the moment, they bring us into a different trajectory. They show us things that we didn't see before. They help us to find the strength to become the things we didn't think we could become. So, in that way, I'm very grateful to have those experiences. And as a founder, resilience has been something I've needed to cultivate to deal with the many failures I have per day. I'm one of my favorite sayings is that Essence CEO Caroline Wanga, she allows herself to fail 5 times a day. And I allow myself to fail 5 times a day. I might not fail in the biggest ways, but hey, I left that period off that email. I got to keep going, So I think I've had to learn to be resilient and develop that growth mindset. So that's a huge part of this season too. So here's what I realized is false. In the path to finding ourselves, there's a couple things that are false. Number one, that you only have one purpose in life. In life, you have so many different purposes wrapped within a purpose. I think a huge part of this podcast has been talking about the many things wrapped within things, the many identities wrapped and layered within identities, and how they impact us. You don't only have one purpose in life. We're multifaceted humans. So don't believe your purpose is just be one thing. Your purpose is to really be your best self, whatever that looks like. And I think to have your authenticity lead you into that. Number two, you should only be a social impact person or a tycoon of business. Yeah, no, you don't have to choose. I think we live in a society that we have enough people integrating and straddling multiple worlds that you don't have to choose between profit and purpose. We explore that through our conversations on jobs and careers on this podcast. This podcast is called The Purposeful Professional for a reason. You don't have to choose between profit or career. We live in a day and age where people do care about sustainable brands. People do care about social justice. And actually, people are able to make a good living off of being in those fields. So we talk a lot about finding that ikagai balance. I think it's called ikagai. It's a Japanese concept. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but it's what the world needs, what you're good at, and what you love to do. There's that intersection between those three spheres that you can work at. So you really don't have to choose. Have an abundance mindset. You don't have to choose. And then my last thing that I realized is false is that entrepreneurship and business are at odds with freedom and creativity. Not necessarily. I think they go hand in hand. At the beginning, it's very creative. You can go out there and you can do different things. You can try different things. But I do think as time moves on, things become actually very blurred. The creative fuses with the strategic, the art fuses with the science, and it creates a very nice symphonic mix. So it's not at odds with freedom and creativity. It actually can provide you with more freedom and creativity if you play your cards right. All right. So I want to leave you with something that I say is the everything ethos. One of the things that I want to set is an intention for this podcast. We talked about what I realized is false and what I've learned, but what have I realized? What is everyone, right? When you're looking for your purpose in life, what can you start with? So there's this thing that I say where everyone is a writer, everyone is an artist, everyone is a speaker, everyone is a creator, and everyone is a leader. I need you to repeat that to yourself. So we're going to repeat it again and again and again. Everyone is a writer. Everyone is an artist. Everyone is a speaker. Everyone is a creator and everyone is a leader. We're going to repeat it again. Everyone is a writer. Everyone is an artist. Everyone is a speaker. Everyone is a creator and everyone is a leader. You are a writer in someone's story, or you're writing your own story. You are an artist creating your own world. You are speaking to something or someone, right? You are a creator creating literally your reality. And then you are a leader. You are leading someone. Someone looks to you for guidance. I think the everything ethos is a huge theme in this season, figuring out that we are simultaneously nothing but everything, right? That's a paradox, right? I am nothing, but I am everything. And I think I've began to realize that through my identities, that I am a writer, artist, speaker, leader, creator. And I want everyone to feel that too. So, here are some tips and reflection questions for you as we close. Start from who you are. What are your gifts and talents? This podcast will teach you how to dive deep into that. I'm big on the gifts, I'm big on the talents. There are some things that you do better than anyone else in the world. Find that, optimize that, live in that. A lot of the time, especially if you come at this from a spiritual perspective, your gifts and your talents are tied to your purpose, right? You know, what you do easily is your gift for the world. The other day I was texting someone and I told them, I was like, wow, that is your gift. Like what you did right there, that's not normal. That is your gift. And I feel like I've learned my gifts so I can affirm other people's gifts. So this whole season will have you learn, start from where you are. What are your gifts and talents, right? What do others notice that you do not see? Go into the hidden things that might not be obvious. We talk a lot on this podcast about having a vision. And I think sometimes people make a vision this spiritual moment. It really is not. It is, what do I see that needs to be done in the world that others might not see? If I see it and others might not see it, well, maybe it's my vision. I think there's this artist called Sir John, and I listened to him on a podcast, and he said, the vision belongs to those who see it. And I want you to hear that again. The vision belongs to those who see it. The vision belongs to those who see it. Facts. I'm going to end that one. Where are you convicted? What is the hill you are willing to, I don't want to say, yeah, I'm not going to say the D word, but what is the hill you're willing to stand on? What do you believe in that no one can change your mind on? I think conviction is a huge theme of this podcast too. Finding that area, finding that space of conviction. You know, what am I convicted about that no one else in this world can let me know, right? To be convicted about. How does that conviction move me, right? The next one is, where is your support, right? Who is in your inner circle? Who are your coaches, your aunties, your uncles, your advisor, etc.? One thing I love is I love in the Black community how we use the term auntie. Like, I love that. Who is your coach? Who is your auntie? Who is your auntie in your head? Where is your support? And I think a lot of what we're talking about is on the path to being a purposeful professional. You need support networks. So stay tuned for that. Also, direction. What is your direction? What is your end goal? Where are you ultimately going? We talk a lot about direction and having a direction on this podcast. And the reason why we do that is because direction is so needed in this world. You need to know where you're going. You need to know where you're going. And I think there are times in my life where I haven't had a direction and I did not know where I was going. And I realized I need to know where I'm going. So start, right? Envision that success, envision where you need to be. Start putting and setting the intention. We live in an age of quote unquote manifestation. Use that intention, right, for your life. Creativity. Where am I the most willing to break the mold? For what reason or cause will I stand at the forefront of progress? I think creativity is like, for what am I willing to stand out? And for some of you, it might be, I'm going to have the best outfits on Instagram, or I'm going to have the first plus size women boutique where women feel welcomed who are plus size. Like, it could be artistic, it could be fashion, it could be standing in terms of scientific progress, it could be standing in terms of women's rights. I think a lot of what we talked about this season was understanding, where am I most willing to break the mold? Like, where am I most willing to do something that has never been done before? And I think creativity is a pillar of this podcast and this experience. And last but not least, spirituality. What do I believe? Who do I believe in? And how do those beliefs nourish me and keep me going even in tough times? I am as left brain as I can be at times. I believe in spirituality. I believe in thinking beyond the brain. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. That's my faith. I believe in going beyond what we feel is possible to understand what God thinks is possible and to see things from God's perspective through getting to know Him. So, a huge part of this podcast, and this is not every episode, but it discusses spirituality. I invite you to learn about faith, even if it's not my own. It doesn't have to be Christianity, but I invite you to learn about faith. What do you believe? Who do you believe in? Right? And how do those beliefs nourish you and keep you going even in tough times? Faith can be such a solace and a source of comfort. And I think spirituality is so necessary. So, in sum, right? Life will be tough, but you have to get tougher, right? Life after graduation is a blessing. You don't have to be scared. After graduation, my creativity and vision have opened up immensely, and it helps me to start this podcast that I'm launching today. So this is my sneak peek, and this is my first episode for the TPP. This was kind of like a ramble, but hopefully it felt authentic. Hopefully you got an understanding of who I am. There will be more personal reflections. Of course, I'll be reflecting on each episode too. Might put that on the Patreon, or I'll put that on a podcast. But we're going to get to know each other. So thank you for listening to TPP podcast, The Purposeful Professional, and I will see you this season as we find ourselves. All right, take care.